Saw an old man in a veteran's hat at the service station pumping his gas. Pulled up beside him, blaring beside Merle. He said,
Hello and welcome to Telling It Like It Is, UGA Extension and Southeast District's newest source for local, unbiased, research-based information about Georgia's number one industry, agriculture. Today's episode, we have a special guest speaker that has graced us with his presence again. But before we get to introducing him, I want to reintroduce myself. I'm Blake Carter. I'm the F&M County Ag and Natural Resources Agent, and with me is my co-host, Savannah Tanner.
Hey, guys.
And we have our I guess a seasoned guest on the podcast. He's been here a couple times. Dr. Wes Porter, thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to really focus on this, getting y'all ready for harvest. And we're going to kind of talk through about harvester setup, the equipment. But before we get to the equipment stuff, I'm going to start our conversation off with something that I've been seeing, and that's irrigating close to cutout. Could you talk to me a little bit about when is the right time? When should we be cutting off? I'm seeing guys, you've got bowls opening all across the field and they're still running the pivot. Is that necessary? What should they be doing?
Blake, that's a good question. And, you know, it's a easy but hard answer to that. And it's something we've talked about for a long time in Georgia. If you go look, our official UGA recommendations in our production guide is 10% open bowl. We say that's when we're supposed to cut the water off. But I've had some conversations over the past few years with some others and then some of my research counterparts, and we started doing a lot more in-depth research in Georgia on irrigation termination timing and where we're supposed to be. Actually, if you look back, one of the first studies I did here, and unfortunately we got yield out of it. We just didn't get the data we wanted out of it. It rained a lot that year. But back in 2014, we did a study where we terminated irrigation overhead, but then continued some of it with subsurface to do some comparisons and all that. And again, I probably shouldn't have brought it up because we don't have a lot of data. But what we were trying to simulate back then was, what does it look like? Do you actually get a yield gain by continuing to irrigate? Because here's what happens. I can tell you today, independent of irrigation, those bowls that are open on the bottom of that plant, the longer they sit in the field, we're going to watch the fiber quality degrade on those. And we hope we don't degrade them to the point that we're getting discounts off of those, right? Those are our money bowls, we call it. If you look, and I would point you guys, and I think Blake and Savannah can probably share this to you too, and they've got the information from me, but through a blog post, and they're going to get some more of it today from me at our training. But we go through and talk about where we actually get paid for on that cotton plant, what it looks like, and, you know, just so you can put it in your mind, basically the bottom third, first position bowls of that plant is where the bulk of our money comes from. About 70% is where we make our money. Now, the reason I'm taking a long time to answer this, because somebody's sitting out there saying, well, what if I lost my bottom crop? What if this happened? What if I had insects that came in at this time of year and I lost all those squares earlier? What if I had a hard rain that came in and beat them off? What if I aborted them? Now, again, there's a lot of what ifs. That's our whole world is what ifs and what can we do. I'm talking about if we've got, in our ideal situation, we've got a normal crop out there, got our bottom crop starting to open, looking at it, that's the bowls that we want, the bowls we want to finish off, the bowls we want to preserve. All right, now let's go back to your original question. Our research that we've started to do since 2021 has started to show in either wet or dry years, so I'm going to talk about both, and I've got some, that blog post has the data, so I would encourage you guys, if you want to put your eyes on what I'm about to say, you search UGA Extension Precision Ag and Irrigation blog, and you will find the main page. You can scroll down to the irrigation termination on Cotton Post, and you'll see this data embedded. But John Snyder, based on some of our talks, put together this study, and he had 4 irrigation termination timings. And that's where you look at it. He terminated, Blake, to your point, at cutout, terminated at first open bowl, terminated at maybe 2 weeks after and 4 weeks after, if I remember right. And I may be telling you awful, but I know he carried it all the way to 4 weeks after open bowl. And he would tell me, he looked me in the face, and John laughed at me and said, nobody's going to irrigate it 4 weeks after open bowl. And every time I've made that comment to agents that I'm pretty sure we're irrigating that far, I get confirmation that you guys have seen, and I guarantee some listeners have done this, that we have ran pivots 4 weeks after first open bowl, right? And so I think the data and him pushing that treatment further than he thought was relevant was actually extremely relevant. So let's talk about 2 scenarios. The first year we ran the study, it was a wet year. We terminated at our cutout treatment. Cutout is 3 nodes above white flower. Has everybody got that? That's where we say that's cutout. First position white flower, 3 nodes above first position white flower. We stopped irrigating at that point. It was a wet year. The rest of those treatments, except for the 4 weeks after open bowl, did not get any additional irrigation. It got 4/10. All right, so again, in a wet year, it rained. We didn't need irrigation except for that one. That little bit of additional irrigation cost me about $4 to $6 per acre, and it did nothing to gain yield. All right, everybody got that? Yield was baseline all across the board. The following year was what we would call a drier year. I think we had around 20 inches of rainfall, give or take. Again, all this data is on the blog post, so if y'all go look and you're like, well, he was off by an inch or two, it's hard to remember everything. But we were around 20 inches during the season. Every treatment after cutout got additional irrigation. All right, so go check the blog post out, guys. I'm going to share with Blake and Savannah today. Actually, they got it on Friday, I think. They got the PowerPoint I sent to them to look at. They can share that with you, actually updated data to make it a little more clear so you know how much additional irrigation it got. But we went, if you look numerically, now you take the first word, numerically, we had higher yields for terminating at cutout. And after that, our yields dropped slightly, about 150, 200 pounds per acre. All right, just keep that in mind. Statistically, it did not. All right, so I'm not having that argument about numerical versus statistical. Let's just go ahead and say the yields were the same for that standpoint. But when we look, we irrigated additionally up to almost 5 inches, I think, by that stuff that was 4 inches after. And it cost us on diesel irrigation almost $85 per acre additional to carry that out to gain zero yield. So I say all that, we've got, and then we've had a study this past year, same way, where we ended up costing ourselves $6 to $12 per acre for additional irrigation events that gain zero yield. All right, so now we've got 3 years of data in Georgia that when I've talked to national colleagues, it corresponds with national work that actually terminating irrigation at cutout shows maximum benefit or maximum return on investment, no yield loss, no penalties there when we move out the rest of the season. So I do want to throw the caveat out there. We were talking when we walked in and talking to some of the guys down there. You know, dove season opened this past weekend. It's been a lot of people were out in the fields over the weekend. It was very hot. I went and worked on our hunting club Saturday morning for a little while, sweated my shirt up a couple of times. It's been warm. Humidity's dropped though some, so we look at lower humidity. We're moving water through. I say all to say you need to evaluate your cotton field and look when we're approaching cutout to first open bowl. What does my soil moisture look like? All right. The nice thing when we have low humidities, we don't have a lot of dew. We have some of these temperatures that's moving that moisture out. We can theoretically irrigate on the open bowls without causing significant fiber degradation, right? Because they don't sit wet, they don't rot. We're not sitting there on them. It'll evaporate out. But what I would ideally like to see is we're moving into cutout. You have what I would call not necessarily field capacity moisture or moisture about standing in the field, but what we would call adequate moisture and walk away from that field. Save that money. All right, that's probably, I don't have a timer in front of me. I didn't look, but that's probably a 10-minute too long explanation to say theoretically we're building a data set that says terminate at cutout. All right. How many of y'all are comfortable doing that? Probably about 1%. That's the problem. So we've got to keep researching this. We've got students working on it now. I'm hopefully in the next year or two when I can get some plot space to do this study. These studies are difficult because environmental factors is going to rain on us every year and mess us up, and you need large plots, lots of land to look at all this. You can't do it in some of our small plots. So I'm hoping to slowly build this in at a research station where we can have 4 or 5 different irrigation timings and look at some of this too, in addition to Snyder's data, in complement to. We're not trying to duplicate a study, but complement what he's shown already and provide y'all more data to comfort you. But what we're so that you have comfort and knowledge, whatever you want to say, as we move in, that we can stop watering at that point. But full profile, adequate moisture at cutout, theoretically you should be able to walk away. If you're not comfortable with that, for sure walk away when we see open bowl, okay? For sure you need to walk away, because anything beyond that, we're just putting money out the window that we can't afford to do with 60-cent cotton, all right?
Well, Wes, you mentioned 60-cent cotton. I had a lot of guys put peanuts under irrigation this year. Yep. So when do we terminate irrigation on peanuts? So
that's the tough question. The peanuts are a lot tougher than they are on cotton. I actually had a phone call last week from somebody in the Mid-South asking for some of that data. Similarly, we got a separate blog post that focuses on that, but let's go into this one. What we want to look at on peanuts, the difference is peanuts will use moisture up to the day you dig them. But what you have to decide is what my pod set looks like, what my harvestable pods look like. When am I going to dig these peanuts, and what do the soil moisture conditions look like coming up to that point? And I say all that to say that if we shut the water off too early, and I've done studies on this too, we're continuing some studies this year and probably pushing it further in the future. We reduce the amount of water at 110 days after planting. And so you say, all right, why is that's a physiological switchover when our plants should stop flowering, stop pegging, and should start full pod development. All right, so that's why that's a physiological important time frame, that 110 days after planting. To me, there's a whole nother thing built into that too. When we plant peanuts, Savannah, to your point, you have a whole lot of peanuts that were planted this past year. When we plant them, and we probably started planting peanuts up this way, I would assume even late April, maybe early May. And so we look at that, and I can guarantee you most of you guys that started at that time frame still have peanuts that are planted into early June. You just couldn't get them all in the ground. We couldn't move across. So let's do some simple math and say we planted May 1st, and we finished before our deadline on June 10th. How many days is that, guys? That's 40 days, isn't it? So if I said I reduce water at 110 days on my peanuts, some of my planted compared to the rest, what's 40 plus 110? That's 150 days. Yep. When would you have dug them? Somewhere in 140 to 150, right? Yep. So if I started digging on my first planted stuff and I let those others sit without moisture for that time frame, I lost 400 pounds per acre in yield in a wet year. So that year was last year, and that's why we're delving deeper into it. What did we have last year that brought water? Y'all were worse over here. Mm-hmm. Debbie hammered you first, and then Helene hammered you. We caught both of those storms at the site. So we had, if you go look at my rainfall distribution, we got significant rain in the fall, probably too much out of them. But when you compare those drier peanuts, even with those two storms, to my adequately irrigated peanuts, that was 400 pounds per acre. Wow. Was not statistically significant, but if we want to talk 400 pounds, I don't want to lose 400 pounds for walking away too quick. So, Savannah, let's go back and revisit your point. I think we have a bad tendency to start harvesting our first planted peanuts and to say, my peanuts are done, I'm in harvest mode, and we start working around that cycle, right? Yep. Field A, field B, field C, field D, and keep working around. I have to, when I start harvesting field A, I have to continue to manage field B, C, D, E, all the way around, depending on time. And what I want to do is make sure I have adequate moisture up to that point. So now we're probably in our, let's call our average planted peanuts, we're at a 1/2 to 6/10 an inch a week that they need. Water use is tapering off. They don't need a whole lot. But we were talking right before we started this podcast down there, there's no predicted rainfall in the next 7 days at least, unless whatever's going on with Gabrielle down there. And we, to be honest, I don't know if we want that to form strong and move up, right? We can manage our dry land, our irrigation, we can manage. So let's stay on top of that water use. Either, if you're at 6/10, if it were me, I would probably try to take that 6/10 and split it into two, not 2 3/10, but to say drag that thing almost over, like instead of a 7-day week, like a 9 or 10, 11-day week. Does that make sense? So I put out 6 or 7/10 on Monday, and then I would probably come back, evaluate everything, come back maybe like Tuesday, Wednesday, the following week, and do it again, kind of spread those out and move them around. So it's more of an art with peanuts. We want to have adequate moisture. We want to keep irrigating them up until about the day before we dig. Somebody asked me last week, and we're hopefully going to cover it on the All About the Pod podcast this Friday. But and I think we're about to get into this in just a minute. You guys are going to ask me, so I'm going to jump ahead and then let y'all come back and ask. But when we go to dig these peanuts, when we look at digger setup, dry conditions suck. Dry conditions are hard to manage with our digger. So we want to apply about, if we've been dry, theoretically we shouldn't have let them get that dry, right? Mm-hmm. We shouldn't have dried them down that. We hope when we get up to the point of digging those peanuts, we've got adequate moisture to dig them. If we don't, we'll revisit that in a minute. So let's make the comment, Savannah, back to your point. As we move towards the end of the season, ensure we have adequate moisture we're able to dig without being saturated. We can't control rain, but we can control our irrigation, and ensure that we've continued to irrigate those peanuts up until you guys are doing the blasting for them, up until you tell them we're about to pull them out of the ground, and you know what that time frame looks like. Manage them up to that point.
Now, you mentioned about the about like too dry. So if you're in an irrigated field and it's too dry there, is there a set number of how much you should run the pivot to get some moisture back into the ground?
Yeah, so we want to go between before digging, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So we get ready to go dig. We want to shoot somewhere between about a half to 3/4, not more than an inch. An inch is going to leave us saturated, I can tell you, and this is going to be dependent upon upon soil type. A heavier soil, putting more on a heavier soil is going to make it a lot harder. It's going to make it stick. And I know up around the East Georgia area, it's going to be a little bit, for the most part, you are going to have a little bit lighter soils than we have like in the western part over around that Americas, Plains, all that area. But you still got pockets of clay. Don't let them pockets of clay bring it where you're going to have clay galls or clay, mud stuck to those peanuts. That's why you don't want to put that inch in on there. So keep that in mind as you get towards that point, about a half to 3/4 of an inch the evening before. The question was asked in the Southwest, and you guys will know better than me up here. Y'all have some big pivots. Y'all's problem is I don't think you have as many big pivots up here, but you got lower flow rates in Wales, so it takes longer to apply that. In bigger fields, we may even have the opportunity where we started the pivot the night before, but it's going to take it 2 or 3 days to get around. But peanut harvest is slow. We could almost be chasing that pivot across the field as it takes the 2 or 3 days to get around if we logistically set it up that way, if that makes sense, right?
Yep.
We're digging where the peanut's going to be finished, and we've got an approximately 12 or so hours ahead of us where that pivot's still running that we're finishing up and kind of following behind it if it's been dry like this. So, yeah.
Well, kind of switching gears from irrigation and cut out to thinking about what you mentioned earlier about the checklist. As we're getting into this time of year, what can you go over for cotton and for peanuts? What are the checklists that guys should be thinking about?
Yeah, so we've worked another thing. I hate to keep pointing you back to it, but the reason we do, if you want a visual, we've really worked on 2 blog posts for both of them. The cotton one went out this morning on a ride up here to Midville, and the peanut one's been out about a week. I'll throw a big thanks out to Ashley Smith again for helping us with that one. She did a good harvest meeting last year, and we worked to put that one together, so I appreciate her help with it. But see, when you go look, I'll miss some stuff on the peanut digger, I promise. And my comment about a peanut digger, looking at the thing, you're like, it's a simple machine, but it's not. This is a very complicated machine that a lot of things are happening and going on. So the first thing I would say, very simplistic, very low-hanging fruit. The tractor you're going to use and/or tractors, usually we're running multiple ones, check your tires and your tire pressure. If you've had to change a tire recently, please check if it's a different branded tire than the others or something's different in there and it's a different size and that tractor's not sitting perfectly level. This comes from KMC, not me. I talked to a KMC engineer. One of the biggest problems they've had with diggers is a tractor that you can't get it level because you either have a different size tire or you've got a tire that's leaking down. So I'm going to go back and say if you hadn't changed the tire but you've had a slow leak over the season and we've ignored in that tire. I was told a story last year by an engineer that his brother-in-law or brother was digging peanuts, and he was great at the beginning of every day, and by about mid-afternoon, he couldn't figure out what was wrong on one side of his digger. His tire was leaking down. Just enough. Yeah. Stupid thing. Yeah, you wouldn't think that 5 or 10 PSI is going to make a difference, but you think on a 6-row digger, when we turn just a little bit at the tractor and we were level, we're not level out at the side anymore. So tire size, tire pressure first. Mm-hmm. Level it on concrete. Also, your tires on your digger. We pulled ours out this year, and I was embarrassed to pull it out. It was in whoever used it at the end of last year. I don't know if they listened to the podcast or not, but they know who they are. They gave it back to us in poor shape. All the tires on it were flat on the digger, so we've got to replace all the tires. They were dry rotted and pulled off the rims. You don't want to be there. They had also bent one of our coulters up front, so that's critical that your coulters are sharp, of the right size, and in track with your row, because if not, you're not going to cut your vines right and dig them up. The other thing that they did, and I'm not picking on them, and I think we're all guilty of this, we get done digging, we're like, thank God we're done, we're going to hook the digger and move to cotton, right? Camp walked in here on us. He's about to jump in, but we get done, and then we're ready to move on to our next crop, and we completely forget what shape our blades are in. We're changing blades, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but probably one of the first things you need to do this year, I can guarantee you, unless you changed the blades last year before you parked it in the shed, you better change blades first.
Yep.
The value, I asked the value last week at our similar agent training, so you two guys are going to get the pre-question to this when I asked them, y'all can't answer. So I asked them, I said, how often should you change blades on the digger? And some of our young, ambitious agents, I'm not going to call any names out, they were like 500 acres, 1,000 acres, here, there. Miss Savannah's laughing. She already knows better. Yeah, I know. You know what? In a tough condition, we're 2 to 3 acres. In an ideal condition, we're hoping we get like 5 to 10, 15 acres out of them, right? We're changing blades pretty often on those systems. So, and it's easy to see when they wear. So change your blades. When we look up at our vine lifters and the clearance between vine lifters and our Rattler conveyor, we got to make sure that that's set right. Again, all this on the blog post, your actual distances, so I'm not going to go over them here. Set that right. The other thing I see done a lot on your Rattler conveyors, On those chains, people will bend bars because we'll get rocks or whatever, and they'll reinstall those bars backwards. Make sure that the angle on those is pointed the right way when we install those bars back on. When we get over to our inverters, make sure we hadn't accidentally backed that thing into a tree or the woods, where our inverters and our guides on the back are bent or anything, because if that's the case, we're not going to roll those peanuts over the way they're supposed to do. And then check your Rattler conveyor chain itself. And when it gets worn, it's going to droop. And I'm going to tell you, I always forget where there's a spot. You need to see your manual. There's a spot you're supposed to measure that, and it's supposed to have a very small clearance between the frame and that chain. If that clearance is bigger, that means it's worn out. That means you need to replace that Rattler conveyor chain. And also the drive, the belts, and the U-joints and all that stuff on the Rattler conveyor in there. Make sure everything's smooth in there where it attaches to your inverters and everything else. So, again, go through that machine. Me, logically, I like to start at the front of the machine and work back so we don't miss anything. That's why I like that checklist I have, because what happens to me, especially when we're doing agent training, I get to talking and get distracted. We know somebody asks me a question, I'll forget about a part. Use that blog post they're going to share with you guys. Go to your manual. Do the same thing. Start at the front of the machine and work your way back. So that's talking about your peanut digger. On your peanut combine, very similarly, we need to go in that machine, start at our pickup head, and check all the way through the machine. I don't have a checklist ready for it. I've talked to engineers, and I had a good handle on it last year we talked about. I don't know if we'll get to that or not this year. Go to your manual, check all your systems, make sure we're not losing peanuts anywhere, make sure our aggressiveness is set where we're supposed to. Check the back, check the fan speed. There's a lot of different settings on that machine that your book will tell you if we're losing too many peanuts out the back. Now we need to say, are we losing pops or are we losing actual peanuts, right?
Yep.
You check our straw walkers, check the aggressiveness under it, check our fan speed, see what we're blowing through, etc. Come back to the cotton picker. As I alluded to, Camp walked in to add to some stuff in a minute. Cotton pickers are a very expensive, very complicated machine, guys. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of money that's in that machine and a lot that's going on. We want to start with the head of that machine. We're going to talk about that today. Our spindles, our doffers, our grease system, our pressure plates in the front. We want to check all that. We can talk about that all day, but the first thing I like to check on the systems is I open up the side door and go down and check all my rows of spindles. Look for any broken spindles, any chipped spindles, any issues in there. Look for any broke, cracked doffer pads in there. You do know if we grind those, it's the whole column. And then if something's beyond repair, we're replacing a whole column in there, so we got to keep that in mind. But again, we got to make sure more commonly, what happens is some of our bottom rows of spindles and bottom rows of doffers are going to accidentally pick up. If we got short, dry land cotton or cotton we're running really low to the ground, we're going to put. Evidently, it's going to happen. We're going to run something through that machine, a rock, a brick. We all know that, and it's going to get in there and mess up spindles and doffers, and moisture pads and all that. So check all that system. Also, there's probably a lot more I could talk about on the head right there. The other thing I would also tell you guys, if you're using the module building pickers, the recent blog post goes in how to calibrate the handler weighing system on that. For our agents, I think that's a powerful tool. Even if you're not doing some on-farm checks, I think as a farmer yourself, just knowing what your approximate module weights are coming off, that's great. It's a very simple calibration procedure. We've got pictures on that blog post. We tell you how to calibrate it, and then we even take you so far if you've got a yield monitor to calibrate how to calibrate that yield monitor. So a lot of opportunities to provide data to help you move forward into the season, to help validate some of the stuff you're doing, even to help check some of the stuff you're doing on those machines. But before we get into that really advanced portions of it, we want to make sure that we're set up and harvesting our crop right, and I guess the last thing I would say, I don't know how many of you guys look at your pressure plate settings and where they're at, but we want to make sure the aggressiveness of those is matching what we're doing on our crop. I don't know how widespread it is up this way. I know we hear about some like skip row or ultra wide row cotton. We hear about different populations. And then we got dryland cotton that may not be as good. As we transition through those scenarios, and if you're picking through different scenarios, we need to be thinking about adjusting the pressure plates on those heads, because if we're too aggressive and really thick, high biomass cotton, I'm just going to use an example. Skip row cotton's going to do that, right? Low population cotton's going to do that. We got to be less aggressive because we're moving more material through. If we're too aggressive, we're probably going to pull plants out. And then we got smaller plants down on the ground that don't have as high yield potential. We might want to be more aggressive so we're not leaving fiber on those plants. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and before we switch and get into camp and talk a little bit more on the cotton side, I want to ask one last thing. safety wise when they're as we're getting into this with some just making sure the harvester's right, but getting out in the field. I know how many times I've rode with a farmer and we've had to stop and get stuff out of the head of the cotton picker. Can you talk through some of the safety tips?
I push this to our agents all the time. This is the part that worries me the most, and I'm probably even more sensitive to it. I had some students one time that came back and told me they were helping on one of the trials we did. They were helping them do the onboard module weighing system and hit the button at the wrong time and injected the module before it was wrapped. And then they sat there and fed the cotton back into the head. I know Blake just closed his eyes and back. That is the most dangerous thing you can do. You got to find a way to open that door and let it go straight into the suction or something around the head or whatever. Keep that in mind. You agents, if you listen to this in the region, you are out there helping these guys with it. I've looked at the training that we're about to go back to. We got a lot of young agents over there that hadn't been around this machinery. And you get out there and you're eager and you're ready to roll and help this farmer. And like you just said, you pull a cotton stalk up and you're like, man, I'll go get it. Or we're out there and we bust a module. You're like, I'll throw it in there. Please, please, please be smart about this. Follow safety procedures. Make sure you can be seen. Make sure that it's clear that he sees you. If you're ever behind that machine, generally there's one camera back there. He still may not see you. There's a lot of blind spots on that machine. The header of that machine with those spindles up front, even when we were talking about that Camp was shaking his head, no, over here, that is so, so dangerous up in there. You can get pulled in that machine so quick. Same way on a peanut combine, we got excessive vines that are wrapping up around that head on the pickup head. Make sure everything's shut off. Make sure the operator, please nobody take offense to what I'm about to say. Usually I feel like cotton pickers, that's some of our more skilled operators in that machine because it costs $1 million. But when we're out picking peanuts, generally we're running 5 or 6 tractors. And whoever can drive that tractor and keep that auto steer online is who's doing it. And it's zero against them. They have one job to do, drive that tractor. If you're in there riding with them or working, please make sure they see you. And in some cases, English probably is not their first language. Make sure there's clear communication that you're about to be here. Shut PTOs off. Shut this system off. Shut headers off. Anything that's going on. Don't be climbing up in those systems, climbing around, trying to be eager, trying to help and get yourself sucked into something. I mean, I hate it's as simple as that. And it happens in a flash. You don't think that you're in the way, and then all of a sudden there's a problem. So please, please, please be safe.
We had several dogs that came in when I worked at the vet's office that had been sucked into combines, cotton pickers, and I can tell
running
you,
beside them.
It is the worst thing you have ever seen, and I think we only saved one out of the 4 or 5 that we ever saw. But
and unfortunately, the one was probably in poor shape the rest of his life.
And it's just awful. But you mentioned something earlier about these harvesters, cotton pickers, whatever. We do have Camp Hand with us, and what he mentioned was that it has to be kind of prepared right before we can even look at the harvester. And so Camp's going to talk with us a little bit about cotton defoliation and what we should be looking at in regard to that.
I hate cotton pickers. I'll just be honest with you. Those pieces of equipment scare me to death. And, I mean, I just started driving ours on the station a couple years ago, and I still don't like it. Like, I mean, it scares me. I mean, I make sure that anytime I get off of it, the heads are disengaged. Like, we can't cut ours off because if we cut it off, then it probably won't cut back on. So we got to leave it running, but it's in neutral. The heads are disengaged anytime we're looking at it. I mean, one time, this is stupid. I was kicking one of the bars because it was stopped up, you know, and I was using my heel and a spindle poked through the sole of my boot. And, like, I was bleeding. Yeah, I was bleeding, and I didn't even know it until I got home. I was like, man, my foot hurts, you know. I took my shoe off, and I was like, holy cow. Like, that thing poked through. I mean, it is just not – it's not something to play around with. I mean, people die. Like, I mean, you know, and that's just not okay, you know. Savannah mentioned something about dogs. She has a friend here with us, and I think I hope I made a friend because that's a good dog. So
he's my favorite. He is.
Yeah, he's a good dog. So
he's a little mad with me. He's a bird dog in training, and if your mama can't hit no birds, he gets pretty irritated.
It happens. My dog gets ill with me too. So.
Probably can't hear me. Mine used to dock me off the stool if I missed a couple times.
Oh, mine. Mine whines. I mean, I shoot and nothing falls, and I mean, part of it's the way that I trained her was that it was anytime I shot a gun, something was one of those dummies was falling out of there. Well, that was a mistake because we went hunting and then I start shooting and nothing falls, and it's like what the heck, you know? So
if you didn't hear Wes, he said that his would knock him off the stool if he missed a couple times in a row. I'd be off the stool more than I'd be on it.
All right, so defoliation. Okay, so this is great defoliation weather. To me, like brisk morning, sunshine for the next couple weeks. It is a little more windy than I'd like, but that's just part of the deal. It's dry though out in the field. Like there wasn't any dew on the cotton this morning. I went and pulled a couple samples for the agent training we're about to do, and that one thing I want to say is that this crop, a lot of people in this part of the state probably planted later than they wanted. It happens. Yes. So it's like, hey, whatever. But this crop is moving, and it's moving fast. And if you're not out there looking, you're gonna miss it. And so it's even that stuff that was planted in June. I planted some June 11th down in Tifton, and it is cutting out on us. And so it's fixing to start opening probably in the next week. This stuff that's planted in the first couple weeks of June. And Wes, did you touch on irrigation? So I even looked at some of the plants out there in the field today. Some of them were cutting out and just starting to open in the bottom. And so I pulled one of those samples to kind of show everybody. But a lot of this cotton that was planted May 22nd. So it's starting to open, but this June stuff is not far behind it. Just because August really has set us up good for a good crop, I think. And so we caught rains when we needed them for the most part. I know that it's starting to get a little dry in places, and so it's like and so it's we could use maybe one more good one to kind of finish us off, especially on this late cotton. But I think we're in really good shape. And like I said, that August spell has kind of put us in position here for the crop to really start moving along. And so we do need to start thinking about defoliation, the timeliness. I don't know how many times I can say it, but we got to be on time with this. And there's a lot of reasons, right? And we can talk about all those reasons. But I went on a dove hunt yesterday down on the Colquitt-Mitchell County line, and I mean most of the fields that I drove by, if I can drive by it at 60 mile an hour and go, man, that's ready, it's past ready. You get what I'm saying? Like we need to be out there looking because this stuff I'm telling you, it's moving faster than you think it is. Because it just is. It's gotten my attention in the last couple weeks.
Camp, I'm gonna ask the question. And maybe I shouldn't because we're all sick of talking about it.
Yeah.
But I'm in a hot spot.
Yeah.
How is this jacid going to impact us defoliating? Yeah. And how critical is it for timely defoliation because of that?
All right, so I told a group last week, there's two things that I'm just tired of talking about and maybe a little bit burnt out on. One of them's talking about Brazil and just how they're doing in the cotton business. I'm just tired of talking about it. And then the other thing is jassids. I'm just tired of jassids. But we're another thing while we're on the jassids. Have y'all had anybody? Has Philip talked about it on this podcast at all? I know he came to your county and did.
Yeah, he's not talked about it on the podcast. Blake and I talked about it a little bit, right. But it actually that will be in this episode. No, it was in the previous episode.
Okay, all right.
His last update.
Okay, all right, good.
I also want to mention that I said that Bydron had a 24-day re-entry period. It is not 24 days.
Well, it may not be a bad idea to wait that long. That's not a bad idea. Yeah. So I want to say just real quick while we're on the jacid, if something can be done, it is being done. All right. I want everybody to know that down in problem areas and down around Tifton, we're doing everything we can. and even doing some stuff that's way off the wall. Like today's September 8th, is that right? 2 weeks ago, I planted some cotton. Okay, so I mean, we're doing some weird stuff just to try to get answers for this year, but then kind of try to put us in a good position for next year. So, what was that? You were going to say something?
No, we'll talk about it.
Okay, that's fine. So, all right, the question was defoliation and jassids. All right, so there's a few things to think about. The first one, if you got a jassid problem and you want to get out of a fight, then the easiest way to do that is to defoliate the cotton on time. I mean, that's just how it is. Okay, we can even have a conversation. I was starting to look into some old literature on defoliating a little early. So, just in case we get into a real tight on some of this stuff. So, if you're in a jassid fight and you want to get out, and really the main reason you would do this is because you're tired of looking at it and tired of looking at this cotton turn yellow and red and all kind of colors and do all the cupping and whatever, and you're tired of seeing them on your sprayer, which I'm tired of seeing on my sprayer, defoliate the cotton because they're feeding on the leaves. They're not going to feed on the bolls. You defoliate the cotton, they're going somewhere else. Now, that's another big key here, is that when you start defoliating cotton, they're going somewhere, okay? So if you got May cotton on your farm, let's say, that's ready to defoliate, stuff that was planted the first part of May, maybe even up to May 15th, okay? And you also have June cotton on your place. Let's say it's right across the road. If you defoliate that May cotton, they're going somewhere, okay? And they're probably going to go to that later cotton. So you still need to be vigilant with this pest and take corrective action as necessary. Of course, these guys have done a great job, Blake and Savannah and the other agents, on getting the information out there. Another take-home on the jassid is just don't go spray Bidrin on yellow cotton just because it's yellow, please. I mean, Savannah sent me some pictures last week. It can be potash, it can be nematodes, it can be anything, okay? Confirm that they're there and then make the decision, okay? All right, so the impacts of the jassid on defoliation. We don't know, just like everything else, right? But I can speculate, okay? So the greener a leaf is, the higher chance. If it ain't red, it's still living, okay? If it's red, it is on its way to dying, all right? So if it's red and kind of going down that road of crashing, it's going to be really hard to get off the plant.
So that really doesn't matter if it's jacid or potash in that aspect.
Well, a lot of times those potash symptoms will fall off. Like if it gets real bad, those leaves will fall. The jacid leaves, for some reason, it looks like they're sticking. Okay, so if we go out and say, all right, well, I'm going to defoliate this cotton, and you've had a jacid problem, and they turned red, but now they're brown, and they're still on the plant, I'm not convinced they're coming off. Okay, so you start looking at leaf grade issues, trash issues, things like that, okay, potentially, all right? If they're yellow or green, we got a chance to get them off, okay? And that's another reason to defoliate on time, okay? Because if you don't, and they just keep doing their thing and keep eating and feeding on the underside of those leaves and kill them and they get necrotic, then it's going to be extremely hard to get the leaves off of that plant, okay? So I've gotten some questions about other quality parameters, like let's say the jassids feed so, and I talked to a grower down in Brooks County a couple weeks ago, and she was asking me about when to defoliate. Her crop was 60% open. She had jassids, but the bolls in the top were soft, meaning that they were probably not going to open if you sprayed Ethifon. But on the off chance that they did, and you run a picker through there, you start thinking micronair, okay? And low micronair is bad. We don't want that. I don't think it would go low mic, but it could. And so, because again, you pick all the stuff together and all gets lumped together, and it could go low, but I don't think it will. Not into discount ranges. So that's another thing to think about. A grower at a defoliation meeting last Thursday ask me about bark associated with this thing, and I mean, I've seen them kill cotton, and like I don't even want to go there because like bark's not fun. That's a 4-cent discount if you get caught on it. So it's I hope that it's not that bad, but it could be in certain spots. And so again, another reason to be timely with defoliation, just to make sure that we don't have those type of issues. So yeah, sorry.
Well, no, I've got us one last question because we are getting close to our time, and I appreciate you speaking with us, Camp. You mentioned earlier about timeliness and those kind of factors, but let's say we just sprayed, we're getting out there, we're defoliating, but then a big rainstorm happens.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the impacts that we got to think about when we defoliate when it comes to environmental factors?
Yeah. So the big one right now, fortunately, it looks like the next couple weeks are clear.
Right.
We got sunshine, which is really what we need.
Yep.
For a good defoliation. So sunshine is good. Temperature is kind of the thing that most people think about. Once we get into November, and I know November's a long way off, but that's kind of whenever we start thinking about these rain showers, unless a storm, which we don't even want to talk about,
Knock on wood.
comes again. But it happens, right? That's part of growing cotton in the Southeast, and so, yeah, so environmental factors, you want to change your rates and your tank mixes based on temperature for most of your products. You may want to go with higher rates during cooler temperatures. So like today is September 8th and tomorrow September 9th are pretty cool days this week. And even looking in the northeast part of the state, I mean, the high up there is like 78 or something. So, I mean, it's really nice. But I mean, even here, like the high is 82, 83. So it's like, I'm thinking on days like the next two, maybe like 12 ounces of Folex versus 10 or 8 closer to the end of the week whenever it gets back up to 88, 89 degrees. And so those type products, your Folex and your prep, we need to increase the rates as it gets cooler. Once it kind of hardens off and gets real cold, we can pull the thiodiaziron products that are helping with regrowth and stuff like that. Because once it gets real cold, the cotton plant's not going to regrow. But all that stuff, is available to county agents. Rain, you brought up rain, and so rain-free periods become a big deal. Thiodiaziron has a 24-hour rain-free period, which is crazy. But it is what it is. You mix it with Folex, it cuts it down to 12 hours. So that's a good thing for us. But two, really, I don't like defoliating that close to a rainstorm. And I mean, I know that it happens and stuff just pops up or whatever, but normally this time of year, it's wide open. And so, or it's normally pretty sunny. We don't have these pop-up showers like we do in like July, So the weather pattern kind of changes this time of year, and so not as much of a concern. But like I said, really once we defoliate, we need about 3 days of good sunny weather for that stuff to work. And so, and of course, stuff happens. You do what you got to do, but the sunshine, clear weather really helps us out a lot.
Thank you, Camp.
Yeah, sure thing. Sorry, I feel like I was really long-winded, didn't answer any questions.
No, you were fine. I think it's really great. That being said, if you'd like to know more about any of this, all the resources that we talked about will be on our website, Tilling It Like It Is at UGA. And then also, if you'd like to hear more, UGA also has the All About the Pod podcast. They have Camp's Talking Cotton podcast. And then Camp also does the Cotton Specialist Corner podcast, and so he put a good one out, I think last week about the One Big Beautiful Bill.
One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That's going to be a game changer. And I mean, we got to get to October of 2026, which is the hard part, but it's going to change the game for us.
We need a game changer.
Yeah, we do.
Big time.
We do.
So that being said, thank you again, both Wes and Camp, for being part. We are going to go and talk about just a couple of upcoming events. Certainly, we are doing peanut maturity clinics, so talk to your county agent about that. Also, one of the things I forgot to mention is that camp sends out a weekly defoliation recommendation to the agents, so make sure you're asking your agents about what's going on that week and what we should be using to defoliate. Also have the expo coming up, and then all the fairs. Support your local 4-H and FFA kids by attending those and their livestock projects and some of the other projects. The only on-schedule event, with the exception of expo, that I have is we are having an area forestry meeting on October the 29th in Lyons. We've kind of transitioned that some to talk about some of the closures with international paper and things like that, and so we hope to be able to get somebody on the podcast in the next month or so to talk about that. And but that being said, we thank y'all for listening, and we want you guys to stay safe out there and keep tilling it like it is. Thank you.
Gas and tipping cash changed the way I see the world. There's still some good in it, and that good is you, girl.